see Jordan back here with us today. Jordan, as most of you know now, is the Director of Jazz Studies at the Schwab School of Music at Columbus State University in Georgia. He is a Van Doren artist clinician, Selmer Paris saxophone artist, and he is also a composer. His CD is called I Am Not a Virus. It takes Jordan's feelings on international workings, being kind to people, and all of the things that he wants to express through his life. It's available on Spotify, and if you're a CD person, you may get it at Jordan's website. So it is very nice to have Jordan here with us again, and let's give him a nice welcome.
All right. Thank you so much, Lynn. And good morning, everybody. I hope all of you out there on Zoom can hear me. Let Ian know in the chat if you can't. I won't be very helpful in that regard. So anyway, it's great to see so many of you in the classroom. This is really wonderful to be with you. Something that's a little off topic that I did want to say, just in the interest of, oh, I think that's my friend over there. Just in the interest of being thorough, is that I actually released a new record in April, and that record is entitled Nomad, and that is also available on Spotify, Apple Music, all of the usual suspects. Nomad is my new record, and that is out now. Today we're talking about modern marvels, and we're talking about the saxophone in jazz today. And last time we talked about a kind of a plethora of alto saxophonists. And today we're going to talk about some tenor saxophonists, and then we're going to talk about the music that they're playing. And I'm going to show you some of the differences between what we might refer to as a little bit more vintage saxophonists and modern saxophonists. So first things first, let's see. My friend is calling me. So, oh, Ian's gonna go get him. That's great. Thanks, Ian. Okay, so I guess first I can start by playing a little something for you, just to, well, very pragmatically to warm myself up. Some of you may have heard this, but my flight to Michigan got in 8 hours ago. So I don't know about you all, but I prefer to sleep sometimes. And well, there just wasn't a whole lot of that happening, or at least not the amount that I usually like. So all right, here's a little bit of a great old standard. This is called I Hear a Rhapsody. And it's got three writers, Jack Baker, Dick Gaspar, and George Fragos. And I'm surprised that I remembered all of their names, because not a lot of songs have three writers. Usually it's one, sometimes it's two. Hey, Ivan. Hey. So anyway, here's a little bit of an old standard. This is called I Hear a Rhapsody. Thank you. That was I Hear a Rhapsody. If you are just joining us, my name is Jordan VanHemert, and this is my very good friend, Ivan Akansima, over here on the guitar. He's going to be helping us out today. So today, we're talking about modern marvels, and I just wanted to talk about two more notable saxophonists before I jump into the musical part of today. So one of my favorite saxophonists to listen to growing up and even now is the great Joshua Redman, who is the son of saxophonist Dewey Redman and was born in 1969 in Berkeley, California. And I always make jokes in Georgia about the weather versus Michigan because that's kind of my frame of reference, and it is very comical to a lot of people that I used to live here and now reside in Georgia. He was said to be inspired by a lot of incredible musicians, including the great John Coltrane, Ornette Coleman, Cannonball Adderley, but also a lot of popular musicians like the Beatles and the Temptations and Prince, Earth, Wind and Fire, Aretha Franklin, Led Zeppelin, and yes, even the Police. Now, I find that really interesting because it shows a trend in jazz that exists from the very beginning all the way up until today. And one of those things is this: people get inspiration from what is going on around them. Popular culture, popular art, the things that people are listening to. A lot of people have this perception about jazz musicians that all we listen to is jazz and all we do is jazz, but that's really not the case. You see, what actually ends up happening is that jazz musicians are just an amalgamation of everything that happens around us. And you hear that through the history of the music. So in the early days, we're talking about popular songs by all of these great composers, Fats Waller, W.C. Handy, things like the St. Louis Blues. And Louis Armstrong played that in the very early days. That was a popular song at the time. And I think sometimes we as jazz musicians, we really forget that. The swing era was the popular music of the day. That was top 40 radio. That is something that is lost on this current generation and even mine. So when you went to these dance halls, you know, they're not playing like, I don't know, Taylor Swift. She wasn't even alive for many years. They weren't playing Taylor Swift. They're playing Count Basie, Duke Ellington. Those orchestras. They were playing Fletcher Henderson. That was the popular music. Now, bebop in the 1940s and 50s strayed away from that because bop musicians got really tired of saying, of being popular enough to be comprehended, frankly. And it was, in a lot of senses, it was African-American musicians' way of taking a music back and codifying it into something that was an elite form of art. So the one exception is kind of bebop, but even then, Charlie Parker was said to have carried around scores of Stravinsky. He's carried around, and as a matter of fact, one of my favorite recordings that he ever did, Charlie Parker with strings, it said that he was so intimidated to go into the studio with those classical musicians because he had such a deep level of respect for them. Fast forward to the 1950s. Hard bop, the music of Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. That music is all based on grooving and dancing to the music, because bebop, people couldn't dance to that, purposefully, I might add. Hard bop, you could dance to it. And as a matter of fact, Art Blakey even went on record saying, if they aren't dancing, we aren't doing our jobs. It was based on all of the Black popular music that was happening at the time. So think doo-wop, early R&B, like that mid-century R&B, the rhythm and blues, as it was called then. All of these art forms is based on popular music. Now, fast forward to Joshua Redman, born in 1969. A lot of people consider him to be a young lion, but he is no spring chicken. And Joshua was doing the same thing as his musical ancestors. And something that I think we lose a lot of the time is we see that as this modernist trend. Oh yeah, that now that we're thinking about pop music now. No. We've been doing that for years. And so when I say that Joshua got a lot of inspiration from Aretha and the Temptations and the Police, and yes, even Led Zeppelin, that's not as much modern or new completely as it is neoclassical. That is to say, a spin on something old that we have in a different day. So Joshua Redman, incredible musician. He actually just went on a tour. Speaking of musicians that you can see live, he actually went on a tour. He was recently at Hill Auditorium in Ann Arbor, and he was with his band from, I think, 20 years ago. And it was off of, they recorded a record together, one record. It's called Mood Swings. It's one of my favorite records of all time. If you have a chance to check it out, you should, because it's based on emotions. And each song has an emotion kind of title. Like one of them is called Rejoice. And it's just the happiest, just bounciest song that you've ever heard. Now, the band on this record was Joshua Redman on tenor saxophone, Brad Maldau on piano, Christian McBride on the bass, and the great Brian Blade on the drums. Wonderful group of musicians. Now, when you get an all-star lineup like that, it doesn't always necessarily work out, because what matters in this music is chemistry more than anything else. It's how you interact with other musicians. Nothing matters about how good you are. Nobody cares. Like once you reach a certain level, it's just like all, shades of blue or something, So this band had chemistry. Now, 20 years later, they went on a reunion tour and cut another record together. So that album now is out as well. And you can hear the same band from 20 years ago playing music. And it's interesting to compare the two because it's the same people. And, when I listen to it, I don't hear that suddenly magically like Joshua Redman's a better saxophonist. I mean, he is, but what I hear is that they've just lived more life. They've gained wisdom, experience. And those things, above anything else, are the things that determine music from, well, architecture or something. So, Joshua Redman, great saxophonist. This is a tune we're going to play. Are you ready there, Maestro? We're going to play a tune that is one of my favorite tunes from an album of his called Spirit of the Moment. And this particular song is a tune by the great Sonny Rollins. It's entitled St. Thomas. Cool to, yeah. Can you actually give me an A just to make sure we're in the same neighborhood? Yeah, that's what I thought. All right. Oh, I'm good. I'm good. So do you want to Thank you. St. Thomas by the great Sonny Rollins. Now, something that's really fun about that song is it's got this calypso kind of groove. And I say calypso kind of because it's not exactly a calypso, but it's kind of a calypso. And it's like, I don't know, jazz calypso. And I say that because there are a lot of particularly music from South and Central America that we in jazz, they take and make kind of a spin-off of that kind of rhythm or groove. And so that's one of the ways that's done. Another modern marvel is the great Chris Potter. Now, Chris Potter is a really interesting musician. And he was born in Chicago, Illinois. Get this, 1971. So he's thought of really as an elder statesman in the music, but he's only 2 years older than Joshua. Now, I was thinking about why this was, because I was like, how is it that Joshua receives the moniker of young lion all the time, even still sometimes? And Chris Potter here is this guy who's, you know, really seen as kind of established and very well known. And I thought about it, and what I eventually found is that Chris started and really rose to prominence a lot earlier in his life. So that was something really interesting. And he worked as a sideman with Red Rodney. He worked with the great drummer Paul Motion, who has played with Bill Evans and Lee Konitz and you know, a lot of those groups who, yeah, they're pretty okay. And the great bassist Dave Holland. He played many instruments as a child, but the saxophone really stuck out to him when he heard Paul Desmond. And I think a lot of us as saxophonists and maybe people and musicians have this moment where we're like, oh yeah, this is what I want to do. This is the instrument that I want to play. Chris had that too. And it was listening to the great Paul Desmond. Now, if you listen to Chris Potter, he really doesn't sound anything like Paul Desmond. And a lot of his approaches to music are, he's bringing in a lot of outside elements. He's bringing in a lot of strings. He's got expanded, larger ensembles, whereas usually Desmond was playing with a quartet with Dave Brubeck a lot of the time. So what is it then about Chris Potter that makes him, you know, interesting? Well, Chris is a virtuosic saxophone player. He is absolutely the definition. When I think of the class title, Modern Marvel, he is a marvel. And I have been in a masterclass with him, sitting from me to Lynn away with him. And it was just mind blowing. Like the things he is able to do on the saxophone, mortal people should not be able to do. He is really, really quite a virtuoso. So now that I've talked about some of the saxophone players, and if you remember last week, we've talked about Miguel Zanon, we talked about Alexa Tarantino, and we talked about Kenny Garrett from Detroit, Michigan. Now, today I want to talk about some of them and keep expanding on the music and musical elements in modern saxophone. And to do that, I want to use something kind of familiar. In jazz, we have a lot of these kind of things that we use over and over again, sets of chord changes. I like to kind of think of them as like inside jokes. And the reason I do that is because jazz musicians, when we play these forms, and we'll like quote melodies to each other, it's like we're telling each other jokes. One of these kind of joke forms is George Gershwin's I've Got Rhythm. Jazz musicians take that all the time and we transform it and we turn it upside down, we turn it on its head. Sometimes we even turn it right side up. George Gershwin's I've Got Rhythm. So what I want to do here with Ivan is, sorry, it is markedly less humid than it is in Georgia here, which is good, but also my reeds are not quite used to it. So what I want to do here with Ivan is we're going to play rhythm changes in B flat. All right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off and I'm going to start attempting to play like a swinger, a player like a Lester Young or a Ben Webster, you know, some of these originators of the music. Then I am going to see if I can take it through some of the different eras of the music, the bebop era, the hard bop era, and then I'm going to play in a little bit more of a modernist kind of style. All right. And so I'm going to do, well, you'll see. All right. So I know I've got rhythm is not in B flat, but for this sake it is. Okay. So, all right, so let me kind of break some of that down for you. Not because I think you can't comprehend it, but just because I think there's a beauty in clarity. So first thing I did was I'm playing, and I was thinking kind of a lot like Lester Young, Ben Webster, and I use those names a lot because they're the soloists with some of the great big bands, right? We're talking Duke Ellington, Count Basie. So I was thinking a lot of Lester Leaps In. Whoops. You know, so something that a lot of older school players do is you hear there's that little undulation, that little shake on the note, the vibrato. So I'm going to play it a little bit slower so you can kind of pick up on that. You know, it's a really vocal styling. And that goes back to the origins of the music and really honestly the origins of the saxophone. And if you it kind of translate, the word saxophone is voice of sax, the voice of Adolph Sax. So it has inherently a vocal quality. And the saxophone, if you notice, it starts out at the neck really small, and then the tube gets larger and larger and larger until we get this flared out bell. That is what we refer to as an instrument with a conical bore. And what the conical bore does is it gives it a non-uniform timbre throughout the registers. An instrument with a cylindrical bore has the same kind of tubing diameter, so to speak, throughout the ranges. An example of an instrument with a cylindrical bore is the clarinet. The clarinet has this beautifully uniform timbre throughout all of its registers, and I love the clarinet for this reason. But with the saxophone, you don't really get a ton of uniform timbres. Example, so here's a B flat. Here's also a B flat. And then here's another B flat. All three of those notes have distinctively different characters. It's like here we have like the lawful neutral. Then here's like the chaotic good. You know, it's got a little honk in there. And then here's like the lawful good. They all have different characters. And so one of the fun things about saxophone is you can use those characters in your improvisation, and you can bring out, and what a lot of swing era players did was they brought out, you know, these musicians didn't really have a ton of classical training. They brought out those characters of the instrument. So when they're playing a low B flat, they're bringing out a little bit of that honk, a little bit of that aggressive assertiveness. You know, when they're playing up high, they're playing a little delicate. And then they've got that meatiness in the middle register. So the older school musicians are doing that, and really where we get the idea of, because we work on timbre and trying to make the timbre uniform, that is a classical kind of idea though. And a lot of these older players, they really didn't, that was not a thing that they were pushing toward. So that's the first thing I did, and I'm playing simpler melodic ideas. So if you think of even like Lester Leaps In, the melody. And they're playing the melody a lot of the time, and they're not messing with it. They're not doing a whole lot with it. Now let's fast forward a little bit. Sonny Rollins, Charlie Parker, the bebop era. There we have a rhythm changes tune called Oleo. But only I didn't play it like that on the way out, because I played that tune on the way out. I played it like this. That is a decisively bebop melody. I like to think of bebop as the Baroque music of jazz, because Baroque music is very ornamented. So you have like. You know, you have that in the wrong key, it was Bach double. Anyway, you have a lot of ornamentation. Well, bebop, what we have is and you've got all this other stuff in there, lots of and that stuff, filigree, if you will. So that was a little bit of the bop era. Now, hard bop is a little bit more difficult to codify because it was, in some ways, it was a departure from bebop, and in some ways, it was an expansion of bebop. So, but what you have to think about what it was expanding toward. It was expanding toward the blues. It was expanding toward even a little bit more control of virtuosity of the instrument. So you would hear a lot of double time passages, but a lot of double time passages that made sense. So in other words, not just like, you had so something that you can kind of follow a little bit more easily, but an expansion of that virtuosity, but also you heard the blues. So it's this, you've got the embellishments and the technical virtuosity, but you also have a strong infusion of the blues, and that's hard bop. Now, this modern thing is really interesting because when you have modern music, so we can take rhythm section, we can take rhythm changes, and it's essentially kind of all in this umbrella. I call it an umbrella key of B flat major. And what we as jazz musicians can do is we can, it's like substituting things in a recipe. So if you say, for example, I really like Korean chili flakes, gochugaru. So anytime I see that there's chili flakes in a recipe, I just sub my own. I just sub gochugaru or Korean chili flakes. Similarly, when we see the rhythm changes, we can play the regular changes. And what we're going to do to kind of show you this is I'm going to play the same thing. I'm going to play I've Got Rhythm. And Ivan is, well, he's going to start off. We're going to just do maybe the first 8 bars. And we're going to start off and he's going to play the straight changes, the I've Got Rhythm changes, the ones Gershwin wrote. Then we're going to play Oleo changes. And after that, we're going to play one of those modern subs that you threw in with the half steps, ascending and descending. That really happened a lot in John Coltrane's time. His pianist, McCoy Tyner, did things like that a lot. Now you see Ivan's holding a guitar. And that really shows you how widespread Tyner's influence was, because he's affecting everybody. And again, like I have said in many of my classes before, but I always like repeating it. Jazz is a music of ancestry. It's a music where you have to respect your elders. And we respect where we came from and build off of it. But in that way, we pay homage to those who came before us. So here's some I've Got Rhythm. We'll call it I've Got Rhythm 3 ways. 1, 2, All right, now let's do oleo I've Got Rhythm. So in other words, oleo changes, but I've got, that was the standard I've Got Rhythm, the George Gershwin I've Got Rhythm. It was vanilla ice cream. Now I love vanilla ice cream, don't get me wrong. Now we're gonna do vanilla ice cream with sprinkles. All right, here we go. 1, 2, That was the bebop I've Got Rhythm. That's like I said, vanilla ice cream with sprinkles. Now we're gonna do a modern I've Got Rhythm. This is the twist. This is the twist ice cream cone. You know that the twist is chocolate and vanilla together. We're gonna the twist and it's dipped in chocolate and then covered with sprinkles. That's what this is. All right. My apologies for talking about ice cream so early in the morning. All right, here we go. This is the modern I've Got Rhythm. We're gonna do the twist. Not like do the twist, but this is the twist of, yeah, you got it. It's a little sleep deprived. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, All right, so that's the twist with dipped in chocolate with sprinkles, and you get the idea. Anyway, so now harmony is what changed there. The melody did not change. I was playing the same melody for the most part, whole time. I've Got Rhythm, George Gershwin. The same melody Gershwin wrote. But what changed was the feeling that you got from it, and the way that we did that was with harmony. The melody did not change. Harmony is an interesting tool in music because I think it's often misunderstood. Harmony is, to me, the gateway to the emotions because it controls tension and release. Now, when we play standard I've Got Rhythm, just as a demonstration, we're playing, there's not a ton of tension in this. 1, 2, Not a lot of tension, not a lot of dissonance. Now, when we play the bebop I've got rhythm, there's a lot more tension. And what that means is that the music is building up to something. And I like to refer to this in different contexts as tugging at your heartstrings and making you feel something. The music is supposed to make you feel something. And I think all music is supposed to do that at its core. And when we get so into the brain part of music, the logic, too much, like a lot of logic, which is not bad. Logic is good. Order is good. But if we only think about that, we lose the reason we're here in the first place. It's because music makes you feel something. Music makes you sing and weep and jump for joy and dance. If we lose that, we lose the human element. We lose what's most important. Now, bebop, what that is supposed to make you feel is it's supposed to make you feel tension. You're not wanting to dance over bebop. That's not what it was designed for. It was designed to be a lightning rod for all of the social issues and the civil rights movement that were to come. And it was drawing all of that energy, all of that lightning, all of those charged particles right to that one place. So here's the bebop I've got rhythm, and it's going to be a little bit more tense. All right, 1, 2, Good. Now, we'll get the modern I've got rhythm is really interesting because in bebop, there are a lot of these rules that are set up. Can you play a 1, 6, 2, 5, 3, 6, 2, 5 in B flat? That has a lot of order to it, doesn't it? It sounds logical. It sounds like it's like, all right, everything's going to the right place. I get it. It's very easy to comprehend. Modern music, is that me? My bad. Oh, modern music kind of takes those rules, and it's not that it throws them out the window. That's a common misconception. But it uses them in unconventional ways. So for example, when he'll go, modern music will say, what if we just moved by a step? So can you try that? 1, 2, 1, 2. So it's similar chords, not the same, obviously, but similar chords used in a different way. So it's not that like I said, there's a conception about modern music that we're taking all the rules, we're throwing them out. That's not true. But what it is that we take the same framework and we use it in a different way. And it's not that the rules don't matter, because they do. But it's that once you have the tools, you can use them in a different way. All right? It's like, say you have a hammer, okay? Hammer pounds in a nail, right? Pounds in a nail, yep. But you can also use the other side of the hammer and take the nail out. But when somebody designed a hammer, I don't think they were saying, let's pull nails out. No, they were like, all right, we got to build stuff. We got to, this is a flat part. Great. We're going to pound the nail in. That's what we're doing. But it's the same tool, but you can use it in a different way. That's how modern musicians use harmony. And that is one of the primary differences between those musicians and their musical ancestors. And like I said, we always in this music respect our elders. That's one thing that jazz musicians do over and over and over again. But at the same time, there is a time when you have to do something new. Because I love John Coltrane and Sonny Rollins and Lester Young and Ben Webster. But there was already one of each of those people. And I just have to be me. But here's the thing. The way that we learn this language, because it is a language, is to respect the traditions of the past and to build on them and do our own thing. And when we talk about modern marvels, the thing is, there is no Joshua Redman without Sonny Rollins. There is no Chris Potter without Joe Henderson. There is no Melissa Aldana without Jimmy Heath, without Ben Webster. There is no Alexa Tarantino without Cannonball Adderley. There is no Kenny Garrett without Charlie Parker. There's no Miguel Zenon without Lester Young. So while each of these saxophonists does offer, yes, something really, really special to the music, something new, something fresh, they would not be there without those who came before them. And maybe that's the most important takeaway in what constitutes a modern saxophonist. That even here in 2022, there are musicians popping up all over the place. Now, if you recall last time, my disclaimer was, there is no possible way for me to talk about each and every saxophonist that is inspiring on the scene today. I can't, I would run out of time and I would leave a bunch of people out. And I already did that. I left a bunch of people out. I chose 6. But the thing is, each one of them you can trace back to this lineage. Jazz has a family tree. And the roots are the same roots. And when we talk about that stepwise motion, you know where that stepwise motion is really popular? Modern pop songs, R&B. Maybe not so much Taylor Swift, but it's not like she has no content. And I'm sure she's really like, there is somebody she's really, inspiring out there, jazz musician wise. And some of her songs are actually quite well crafted. No shade, no disrespect to Taylor Swift. So that is essentially the content of our class here. There are a couple things that I want to do. First, I want to open it up for questions. And second, we're going to play some more music for you. So first questions, yeah. Oh, should she have to speak into the mic so the stream can hear it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, people here understand that from Bach, Beethoven, and Brahms going as far back as we can in Western music, we have a B flat is a B flat, an octave away in our culture. Mm-hmm. But there would be some cultures where that's not the way their music is set up. It's not set up in octaves. It's not set up with the scales and that we have. Mm-hmm. So that raises the question of how young children are when they first understand the music world they live in, the structure of the world they live in. For example, what if you took a group of, maybe you've done this, Jordan. Is it Jordan?
Yeah. Yep.
Maybe you've done this. Be with a group of 3-year-olds and tell them, I'm going to play Itsy Bitsy Spider, mm-hmm. Went Up the Water Spout. And every time you hear that, raise your hand. I'm going to play a bunch of stuff and it'll be nice. But every time you hear Itsy Bitsy Spider, raise your hand. And they get so much joy out of it. There it is again. And it's all different and it's really neat. So that idea that there's something you recognize and then there's that you come back to, and then there's variation that you do on it, which is so central to Western music, and it's Bach, Beethoven, Brahms, and everybody else was doing that. It also, if we look at prenatal life, the mm-hmm. baby in the womb, and everybody's so interested in what can the baby understand and so forth. If the baby hears a sound that it recognizes, it relaxes. If it hears a new sound when it's not even, in the 7th month yet, they'll startle. Mm-hmm. So the brain is already saying, I got that one, I know that one. Oh, there's a new one. Now I'm alarmed, now I'm excited, now I'm either curious or frightened or something. So the unknown is the emotional element that's coming in, and the one that's, oh, I got that. And how soon can children do that? So it would be so interesting for you to work something out with very young children where you take a tune they know, like Sunday school tunes. Like, what if we gave you two guys a choice of either Jesus Loves Me or This Little Light of Mine, and have 3-year-olds raise their hand every time they hear the Jesus Loves Me thing and This Little Light of Mine, no matter how fancy and elaborate you get, how young can they still hear it? And wouldn't you think it would be pretty darn young that they could do that? Or don't you think so?
I do, and that's a really, really interesting question. And certainly there are a lot of layers to it. I think a lot about Mary Lou Williams. So interestingly enough, now Mary Lou was the exception, not the rule. She was a child prodigy, and excuse me, she scared the living daylights out of her mother because her mother was sitting down practicing the reed organ in their house. And Mary Lou reached up and played at, I think, maybe 2 or 3 years old, exactly what her mother played back to her. Her mother thought she was possessed by a demon. And of course, this was the Deep South at that time. And like there was a lot of superstition in rural families like that. So Mary Lou scared her mother. She certainly would be the exception, you know, really recognizing enough to repeat and replicate. Whether or not young children can do that, I would say more often than not, I would put it in the category of responding to stimuli. So, and I have not done research on this. This is just from observing the small children in my own life, my nephews, nieces, and such. But, you know, kids they really do recognize, I think they recognize music and they recognize a lot of things. I think what happens is when we're adults, we put a lot of rules around things and we classify things in different ways. Or maybe even when we're older kids, we do that. Younger kids, though, something I've found is I actually did, and this is the youngest group I've worked with kindergartners before. And, you know, I was playing for them and I was playing the blues and just doing a lesson on the blues. And they were like, oh, well, that sounds really cool. And I was like, okay, and cool how? Well, it sounds like really like, well, it sounds a little sad, but it also sounds like really strong or something, they said. And it's interesting to see what they, you know, do notice and pick up on. Now that, like I said, I haven't done a lot of really early childhood kind of research with that. And I agree, it would be very interesting to pick out. But what I do know is that in terms of the whole nature nurture kind of a thing, we are in a society where, just like language acquisition, there is a musical language acquisition that's going on. You're setting up those things. You're setting up those things of and those musical cultural elements, and whether it's, you know, raga in India or the Balinese musical language that later kind of morphs into gamelan, whether it's jazz, whether it's, you know, this Western classical system. All of it is being implanted in kids from a very, very young age. And I think that does, you know, where I see that in advertisements. Because if you think about it, an advertisement and a jingle, like television jingles, advertisement jingles, they are conditioning us to feel certain things based on certain harmonic structures that they know can kind of, you know, mess with us a little bit. Example, children's toy advertisement. Describe the music that you would hear with that kind of advertisement. Maybe it's not exactly a television commercial these days, but maybe it's like, I don't know, YouTube ad or something. What's the music like? It's upbeat.
Yeah, it's probably, it's catchy. Like,
It's catchy.
yeah.
It's bouncy. It's got this like
This is fun.
Yeah, it's got this fun quality because we've, even at that young age, have conditioned children to say, oh, this has got to sound fun, which makes me say that this toy must be fun. So I think that was a very kind of a long walk for a short drink of water, but it basically, my thoughts on the matter are, yes, very early. And I think, as soon as, if you think about it, all speech has pitch. Everything we do has pitch. Some people will tell me they're tone deaf. That's not a thing. I promise you that's not a thing. True tone deafness doesn't exist. Because if you can hear the change in pitch when your lawnmower starts up, you can hear some sort of discernible change in pitch. If you can tell the change in pitch when your mother starts, giving you the business, then you know. That pitch, that inflection, that detail, those things are things that are being instilled in children musically and from the point of language. Music is just another version of that. And I would say that begins right, when they get out into the world and perhaps even before. So, all right. Yeah. Is there a follow-up? It's okay. We got time.
I read that among Chinese speaking people, because their language is based on pitch.
Yeah. Intonation.
If you say, oh, da, rather than da, it's a completely different word with a completely different meaning for the same sounds you are making, but the pitch is making the difference. Therefore, the number of people, the Chinese people who have perfect pitch, if everybody knows what that means, is much higher than in the American population or an English speaking population, because their language already, the pitch that you hear is an important part of the meaning. Whereas for us, it still has emotional meaning. If she says, would you cut it out? Or would you cut that out? That is a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
But since the Chinese dialects and languages make pitch so important, therefore that ability in the linguistic, wiring is highly developed, meaning that when people speaking that language turn to music, they have perfect pitch, which in our culture is not nearly as common. Had you ever heard that before?
I had heard it. I'd never really truly verified it, although I know that, I certainly know, ins and outs of that language without speaking it.
And is there science behind the vibrations or something that mean that a B flat is a B flat, no matter, that is in the science?
Yeah.
Or is it something that is cultural that we made it up that way?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not 100% sure. I think that, in Eastern cultures, like, for example, in the different pitch systems, Indian raga, for example, a B flat is not a B flat. And for us, yes, it is, but it's really not in India. And so I would guess that there's research there. I have not seen it or read it, but it is certainly a very interesting conversation. And I definitely, while I could have guesses, I don't kind of want to speak out of turn here, but you brought up some really, really interesting points.
And when you did this, were you guys improvising, or had you done that before? Would you be improvising what we were watching?
For the most part, yeah. I haven't seen Ivan in 6 months. Yeah, it's been a while. So I kind of told him to just kind of show up, and so yeah, we were improvising a lot of that. Yeah.
If the audience gave you a tune, like this light of mine or this love, you could go to town on either one of those tunes and just really improvise the heck out of it.
Yes, and we will. Just give us like a couple minutes of questions here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I was going to ask both you and Ivan if about the improvisation, and also Ivan, do you just feel what he's playing, and because of your excellence at guitar, you think about, well, this will sound good with what he's playing, or is it more of an organic type of thing.
So the way
Okay.
I'll give him the
Sorry.
mic here. No, it's okay. We can just pass it back and forth.
yeah, since we refer to music as language, so I think the most important service language does is to interact, and that means there's a call and response activity happening. It's a conversation. So there's listening, there's contributing, there's developing ideas. So our ears, I mean, that's how we live life. I mean, in real life. So when we're playing, that's how I'm thinking. So I know, like we all went to school, we were taught ABCDs and all that. But when we're actually having a conversation, we don't go and say, oh, what letter do I need to put together to respond to this? Like, we don't do that. Right. We just, based on ideas, context, there's a little bit of tension. So when we are playing, we know the ABCs, but some of these tunes we play today are, some of the most popular tunes that any jazz musician should at least know. So we know them. But then as soon as he starts blowing, my ears and the information that I have, the training that I have, the understanding I have with the guitar. So I don't think about that, but I know, okay, what key, B flat, cool. And then he starts playing. I'm listening to what ideas he's developing, what he's saying, how he wants to say it. And I'm responding. Now I can decide to be more of a support role, listen. But then at some point, I'm like, how about this? Like we're talking and then I might like when we did the rhythm changes, I played modern changes at some point,
Mm-hmm.
and right away he changed the way he played. But that's something that I just said, well, he's what I think now. And so there's that. So it's really listening creatively and listening with a creative ear. And all we're trying to do is to contribute to the conversation that is happening. And sometimes when you don't have much to contribute, then you listen and, kind of be more supportive. So that's really how I go about it.
Yeah. Couldn't have said it better. That's really the perfect
Thank you.
explanation for what we were doing.
Anyone else? Question? No?
Any questions from online, Ian? In the old chat?
You had mentioned pop music that was
Yeah.
informing
Mhm.
current jazz music. Can you think of the other way around, where an artist like perhaps Clarence Clemens is impacting
Sure.
pop music
Oh,
in a
absolutely.
different way?
Absolutely. Yeah. So jazz has been influencing other types of music since its inception. And if you think about like all of these French impressionists using the Lydian mode, sharp 11, which is instead of this, that's our major scale. This is a Lydian scale. Instead of, and this sounds a little bit more mysterious here. So you think about a lot of these French impressionists using that sort of language, jazz influences there. Of course, George Gershwin, he's writing a lot of classical music, Rhapsody in Blue. He's writing An American in Paris, a lot of orchestral music. That is jazz-inspired classical music. William Grant Still, one of the deans of composition of American symphonic composition. He is using a lot of jazz influence in his music, and especially a lot of the blues. But if you listen to rockabilly, which then became rock and roll, a lot of where that started was an offshoot of the 12-bar blues. And you hear like in early rockabilly, you're hearing walking bass lines. And that morphs into rhythm and blues. And then you have people like Sister Rosetta Tharpe who are coming in here and you know, they're putting their own spin on that. And what they did was they just sped it up. Sister Rosetta was like, I don't know about rock and roll, but all I'm doing is really sped up rhythm and blues. Then you have other kinds of, Clarence Clemens is a great example of an artist who kind of has that background. King Curtis, one of the greatest rock and roll tenor players of all time, was another one. Jazz musicians, educated and dyed-in-the-wool jazz musicians in the 60s and 70s and in the 80s were playing in rock bands. Michael Brecker, Phil Woods, Phil Woods played with Billy Joel, and Michael Brecker played with, a who's who of artists. And when they're playing, they're not playing straight up, bebop, but it's certainly what they're playing is influenced by it. So the answer is yes, and I think a lot of times we like to think of time as a line, like this big continuum that goes, forever in both directions. We like to think of it that way. But the thing is, a lot of it is a little bit more like this. It's loopy and it's things are influencing each other. And if any of you have perhaps seen the network show The Good Place, it's a Jeremy Bearimy. And that didn't go over okay. That's all right. Anyway, so the answer is yes, and I think there are many jazz musicians who have been influenced by pop and classical music. There are just as many pop musicians and other musicians who have been influenced by jazz musicians, not the least of whom have the extensive use of the seventh chord. So in Western music, a lot of the time, in classical music, we use triads. There's 3-note chords. In jazz, we use seventh chords. So what a lot of popular musicians do take from jazz is those harmonic structures. They'll use like a minor 7 chord instead of just the triad. So they'll go. They'll use a lot more complex harmony, and that's one of the things that they got that really comes out of that old school kind of R&B influence, the rhythm and blues, and the African American popular music of the 50s and 60s and the 70s. And what a lot of I think popular musicians, rock and roll, they like to think of themselves as doing things, brand new things. And the reality of that is that even they are, without necessarily acknowledging it, they have that same ancestry of popular music. And something that is similar is that, all those rock and roll guitar solos, it's like, oh yeah, the solo on, I don't know, Jimi Hendrix, or Van Halen, Eruption. Those stem from the improvisation and the cutting contests of the 50s, the bebop era. So the short answer is yes, and the longer answer is what I just said and preceded that with. So yeah. Any other questions, Ian, from the chat, or any other questions in the house here? All right, we're going to play another tune for you, if that's all right. Yeah. All right, let's play This Little Light of Mine. And in the true spirit of Miles Davis, I'll play it and tell you what it is later. All right. I'll let you get kind of strapped in here, safety belted in here, just because don't want any guitars running away. I want to thank you all so much for being here, whether online or here in the classroom. I really appreciated the opportunity. I appreciate your flexibility. When I found out that I was going to be in town, I thought, how silly would it be for me to sit in some coffee shop and do this class if I'm right here in town? It was so great to see so many of you. Will you please give it up for my friend Ivan Akansima here? Yeah. Yeah, I've known Ivan for a long time, and it's always a joy to play with him, as I'm sure you could tell. My new record is on Spotify. It's called Nomad, and as well as my other projects. I was just in Denver and I recorded a brief EP that has some new music on it, some old music, and a little everywhere in between. And a wonderful bassist from Venezuela, Gonzalo Tepa, is on that recording as well. So I can't wait for you all to hear that. Other than that, I really appreciate all of you being such a great audience. It was a joy to present here. And thanks again for Ian and Lynn for having me. I just really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Jordan. We're just so delighted to have you back with us. Thank you all for coming this morning. We'll hope we see you at another HASP class. I just want